Thank you very much to the organizers. Okay, so this lecture focuses on the propaganda campaigns, part of the ideological confrontations between two political entities, which is the Bundesrepublik Deutschland and the Deutsche Demokratische Republik. And in this lecture, for clarity, I'll use the geopolitical terms West Germany and East Germany. Okay? So in April 1960, and about 3 years later, in July 1963, two West German leading figures, Theodor Oberländer and Hans Globke, were sentenced in absentia after short trials staged in East Berlin to life imprisonment. They were found guilty of involvement, and in the case of Oberländer, of direct participation in the systematic murder of Jews. These short trials ended intense propaganda campaigns against Oberländer and Globke, launched in the middle of the 50s by East Germany Politburo Agitation Committee. Just before or shortly after the trials, their political career ended. Oberländer and Globke were targeted as part of the East German government propaganda offensive against West Germany. The Politburo's agitation committee, titled Ausschuss für Deutsche Einheit, Committee for German Unity, aimed to reveal the dark past of ex-Nazis, including war criminals who held high positions in every section of West Germany administration. Under the 1951 Reinstatement Act, many civil servants who had been dismissed after the war during the denazification imposed by the Allies were re-employed and obtained full pension rights for their service in Nazi Germany. Among those who began a new career were hardcore Nazis, officials of the Gestapo and the SD. The central role of ex-Nazis in West German administration reflected the policy of the past, Vergangenheitspolitik, a phrase coined by the historian Norbert Frey. It relates to the policy of amnesty and integration led by the West German government and the political elite during the Konrad Adenauer era, involving both annulment of punishment and integration of former Nazis into the West German society. By the end of the 50s, investigations of the newly established federal body in Ludwigsburg, near Stuttgart, it's a picture taken by me, so in Ludwigsburg. The newly established federal body in Ludwigsburg near Stuttgart, known as the Zentrale Stelle, for the investigation of Nazi crimes exposed. For example, the prominent positions in police stations all over West Germany, that they were staffed by Nazi criminals who during the war participated in mass murders. The establishment of the Zentrale Stelle reflected the change that began gradually and slowly in West Germany about a decade after the establishment of its establishment on the ruins of the Third Reich, concerning the attempt to investigate and punish many Nazi criminals who lived peacefully in West Germany. As opposed to the Zentrale Stelle, the East German Committee for German Unity was not driven by ambition to bring criminals to justice. Headed by Albert Norden, a dedicated communist historian of Jewish origin, it aimed to discredit West Germany by comparing it to Nazi Germany and emphasizing the role of ex-Nazis in its administration. The propaganda was aimed at two audiences. One, the residents of East Germany. It was part of the indoctrination that sought to strengthen the sense of pride and identification of the East Germans, especially the younger generation, with their country, as one that carries the flag of an anti-fascist struggle. It was intended, among other things, to divert attention from the severe domestic and economic and social problems of East Germany and the extreme violation of human rights. The leaders of East Germany state claimed that the regime in the West Germany continued the tradition of reactionary and aggressive forces that caused the destruction and the division of Germany. The second target was the Western public opinion against the background of the Cold War. Instrumentalized the Nazi past, misused and even forging documents with the help of its communist allies, particularly cooperation between the Stasi and the KGB, played a central role in East Germany ideological campaign against its democratic neighbor. Adenauer's refusal to carry out a deeper purge of West German establishment offered East Berlin one of the most effective propaganda themes of the Cold War, wrote the historian Jeffrey Herf. East Germany sought to weaken the support of the Western public opinion in West Germany, particularly towards the end of the decade, when the future of divided Germany, and especially divided Berlin, were in the focus of the interbloc tension. East Germany aimed to stir up the dark past, especially in countries that Nazi Germany had occupied, emphasizing the role of current West German officials who served not so many years ago the racial policy of the Nazi regime. Defaming West Germany as a successor to Nazi Germany was a response to the prolonged political campaign of West Germany to delegitimize the legality of East Germany. Nullifying the legal status of East Germany as a sovereign state, it was defined by the West German leadership as an occupied country, occupied by the Soviets. In accordance with the Hallstein Doctrine, determined by the West German policymaker in 1955, West Germany would break off diplomatic relations that would with countries that would recognize East Germany. Adenauer and the leadership of West Germany argued that their demand to be recognized worldwide as the sole representative of Germany was based on West Germany's democratic system, namely that only elected government has the right to represent the Germans. Following the outlawing of the Communist Party in West Germany in August 1956, the propaganda of East Germany gained momentum. It peaked at the end of the decade and the beginning of the 60s against the background of the conflict over Berlin and the construction of the wall. In Bonn, Adenauer and his minister feared that the Western power might agree to concessions on their behalf, and they were eager to gain the support of Western public opinion. They were concerned about the impact of the anti-West German sentiments on Western policy makers towards the discussion of the future of Berlin. Thus, they invested considerable efforts in advancing their public relations campaign in the United States, trying to improve their relationship with the American Jewish organization, to whom they attributed enormous influence on the American administration. They urged the American Jewish leaders to work to reduce the prejudice in the United States against West Germany. The West Germans reacted to the propaganda onslaught of East Germany by emphasizing its violation of human rights. In addition, they pointed to the hypocrisy of the East Germany, where ex-Nazis were also integrated into the public service. It was clear, however, that the West Germans that the large number of Nazis in service in West German states and the central place they play in the economic and the political elite were not comparable to the situation in East Germany. A special committee of jurists was formed in West Germany to respond to the East German allegations. They pointed out that many of the claims raised by the East German propaganda were based on unreliable and even fabricated historical documents. A similar assessment also appeared in a special report compiled by the British Foreign Office on the influence of former Nazis in West Germany. The report stated that the communist propaganda on this issue is, and I quote, is a mixture of facts, half-truth, and inventions. Nevertheless, the well-orchestrated campaign of Northern Committee, with the help of the Stasi and the KGB, was not all rejected in the Western public opinion. They presented a convincing document taken from the Eastern Europe archives, and moreover, their claims reflected what anyhow many critics of West German policy towards the past, including those in the West Germany, thought to be accurate. Historian Frank Bies emphasized the increasing effect of East Germans' revelation on West Germany's public opinion. He distinguished, however, between a small group of journalists, writers, researchers, and jurists, the spearhead of the in-depth examination of past events, and the majority of the public who preferred to avoid it. Those who called upon the Germans to come to terms with their past pointed out that the murderers are living among us. Die Mörder sind unter uns. They further emphasized that those who were behind the scene of the atrocities and the final solution, the so-called the Hintermänner, are living peaceful life as part of the West German bureaucracy. An Israeli diplomat stationed in Cologne by the end of the 50s as part of the Israeli purchasing mission expressed this perception in Report to Jerusalem. He wrote, and I quote, "Today, ex-Nazis hold many key positions in the administration and in the judiciary. They make up large part of the educational system, particularly among the high school teachers. One must not forget that Bonn itself, not clean and pure." What?
No, we support you.
Okay. Thank you very much. I'll let them know. Okay. And it's not clear and pure. There are ministers and many officials whose past is dubious, to say the least. West German democracy was highly embarrassed by East German's publication targeting prosecutors and judges who served during the Nazi regime and were still serving in West Germany judiciary. They listed hundreds of the so-called the blood judges, the Blutgericht, West German judges and lawyers who during the Nazi era were responsible for arbitrary sentences, mainly death penalties, in the spirit of the Nazi ideology. Many of them served in the so-called the special court, the Sondergerichte, and the people called the Volksgerichtehof. In West Germany, they served in all levels of jurisdiction, including the highest judicial courts, and even in trials of Nazi criminals. They judged Nazi criminals. In 1961, the Bundestag decided that the judges' law will allow and even recommend that those judges and prosecutors who served during the Nazi regime in courts that discussed criminal issues would retrial. The main propaganda assault of East Germany against the so-called Nazis in Bonn was directed against Theodor Oberländer and Hans. Okay, let me just show you these two.
Yes. No.
אני לא הולך עם הדבר הזה.
זה הולך פשוט.
אוקיי, סליחה. Okay, so this is Theodor Oberländer.
The next one?
לא, זה בסדר, אני מסתדר. וזה, and this is Hans Globke.
Which one?
This one. Okay? Hans Globke together with Konrad Adenauer, Heinrich von Brentano, and okay, so this is Hans Globke. Okay. So there we go. Okay. So I said the main propaganda assault of East Germany against the so-called Nazis in Bonn was directed against Theodor Oberländer and Hans Globke. Oberländer was the minister of deportees, refugees and victims of the war, and it was about the 12 million ethnic Germans who were deported after the war from Central and Eastern Europe and were taken in by West Germany. Globke was the director of Adenauer's chancellery, his close and most trustful advisor, and one of the most powerful political figures in West Germany, in West Germany's formative years. Oberländer and Globke were not the only high-ranking governmental ministers and officials whose past during the Nazi period was considered problematic. Two prominent examples were Gerhard Schröder, the Minister of Interior, and at the end of the 50s, and from 1963, the Minister of Foreign Affairs. He was ex-member of the Nazi Party, and the other, which you can see in here, the meeting of NATO in 1954, is Herbert Blankenhorn, one of the two founders of West Germany Foreign Ministry, who during the war served the Nazi Foreign Affairs. However, there was no indication that they took part directly or indirectly in the persecution of innocent people according to the Nazis' racial policy. On the other hand, Oberländer and Globke took an active role in racist policies of the Nazi regime. For critics of the Adenauer administration attitude towards the past, the case of Oberländer and Globke symbolized the struggle against Adenauer's amnesty and integration policy. In the 30s, Oberländer belonged to a large group of academics, historians, demographers, geographers, and economics who passionately purged for the expansion of the Germans into the territories of East European based on the racist nationalist ideas. The research of the East, Ostforschung, in which Oberländer was involved, helped to provide allegedly scientific basis and justification for the subjection of peoples of Eastern Europe. In the 30s, he served as a professor of economic agriculture policy, and at the same time, he also served as in a leadership position of the Nazi Party in East Prussia. He also headed a national organization that worked to strengthen the ethnic Germans, the Volksdeutsche, in their struggle for control of the areas bordering Germany to the east, and to encourage the idea of German expansion to the east, and to strengthen ties with a German Nazi organization in the world. 2 years before the outbreak of the war, Oberländer presented an operative plan for reorganizing reorganizing Poland according to ethnic criteria, which would facilitate the expansion of the Germans. Anti-Semitism was a fundamental element of his worldview. He saw the millions of Jews in Poland as a destructive economic phenomenon that required a solution. In the summer of 1959, East European propaganda against Oberländer increased significantly. The main reason for this was the accusations made by the Nazi criminal Erich Koch at his trial in Warsaw that Oberländer had committed war crimes. Koch was the head of the Nazi party in East Prussia and the government of Ukraine during the war. The campaign against Oberländer was conducted in several locations: in East Germany, in Poland, in Czechoslovakia, in the Soviet Union, as well as in West Germany. In each of them, records of Oberländer's past were uncovered. The vast majority of the allegations were not new. The dramatic change was the accusation that Oberländer was not only a leading ideologist of racism and expansion, but also an initiator of murders in which he even took part. These claims referred to the period of Oberländer's service as an intelligent officer in the Nachtigall battalion, whose Ukrainian soldiers were known for their loyalty to the national Ukraine leader Stefan Bandera. The East European propaganda and later the East German prosecution claimed that Oberländer was involved directly or indirectly in the murder of between 3,000 to 5,000 residents of Lviv during the first week that followed the occupation, when the Nachtigall battalion stayed in the city. Among the murdered, those who were murdered were 34 Polish intellectuals and scientists, including senior academics. The Poles and the East Germans claimed that they held evidence that showing that Oberländer initiated the murder and perpetrated and prepared a list of the victims. The charges against Oberländer, which were baseless as we know today and proved by several historians, regarding the murder of the so-called the Polish professors, were publicly announced by the Polish leader Gomulka during his meeting with Khrushchev in July 1959. The main charge was about the alleged Nachtigall participation in the highly malicious pogrom in Lvov, known as the prison action, which it was shown also in the Nuremberg trial. And you can see here the German soldiers in Lvov, and they filmed the program, in which about 4,000 Jews were murdered. Oberländer denied any responsibility was both for the murder of the Polish professors and for the programs. Indeed, historical studies confirmed his claim that the Nachtigall did not participate as a unit in these atrocities. However, it appears that a few soldiers did participate, mainly on their initiative. But Oberländer's argument that he did not hear about the atrocities during the week that he stayed in Lvov was deemed unreliable. In April 1960, due to severe political pressure, Oberländer was forced to resign, but he continued to serve as a member of the parliament. Shortly before his resignation, the show trial in East Berlin began in the presence of the East German Minister of Justice. It lasted only 9 days, during which the documents that the KGB forged were presented to prove that Oberländer participated in the Lvov atrocities. Towards the beginning of the...
5 more minutes.
So you won't hear about Globke?
It's your decision what we hear about.
No, yes, okay. So, 5 minutes is okay. That the KGB forge were presented to prove that Oberländer participated in the Lvov atrocities. Towards the beginning of the trial, East Germany tried to convince survivors from Israel to testify in the Oberländer trial. The Israeli Ministry of Foreign Affairs acted against these initiatives in response to a special request from West Germany. From the protocol, it appears that only one witness, eventually from Israel, participated. All the other witnesses were residents of Eastern Europe countries. The propaganda assault against Hans Globke was the most prolonged and determined campaign that East Germany waged against the so-called Nazis in Bonn. During the Third Reich, Globke was the high-ranking civil servant as the Reich Ministerium, the Ministry, the Reich's Inner Ministerium, Ministry of Interior, and the author of the anti-democratic and racial regulations, particularly concerned the legal status of the Jews. He wrote the official legal commentary to the Nuremberg laws that was part and defined who could be classified as a Jewish. He also composed, for example, the regulations that all German Jews had to be identified by Jewish names. He wrote the list, which included names that meant to make fun of the Jews. Those who did not have a Jewish name had to adopt the middle name Sarah and Israel. After the war, during the 50s, Globke claimed that he was anti-Nazi and that his interpretation of the Nuremberg law saved the life of thousands of the so-called Mischlinge, the half Jews. During the 50s and the beginning of the 60s, Globke enjoyed extraordinary political power as the director of the Chancellery. He was Adenauer's most trusted advisor, his right hand. Adenauer rejected any political attempt, any pressure to keep Globke from his political power because of his dubious role in the National Socialism administrations. His political power and strong work relations with Adenauer turned him to be the primary target, not only of East Germany, but for all the opponents of Adenauer's administration in and outside West Germany. In 1963, East Germany conducted a show trial against Globke, but the actual peak of the campaign was during the Eichmann trial, about 2 years earlier. During the trial, East Germany, with the help of the communist allies, tried to find evidence without much success that Eichmann and Globke cooperated. They depicted Globke as no less than one of the desk murderers, the Schreibtisch-Täter, claiming that the deeds of Eichmann and his associates in implementing the final solution were based on the regulation which Globke and his colleagues drafted. In all possible channels, the Soviet bloc emphasized Globke's role, exaggerating his position and power. According to the Eastern Bloc propaganda, he was the hinterman, the man behind the scene, the real initiator of the final solution. Accordingly, Eichmann could not proceed without his approval. As part of the propaganda campaign of East Germany during the Eichmann trial, the East German jurist and lawyer Friedrich Karl traveled to Jerusalem. Karl inquired into the possibility of being admitted to the Eichmann trial as an accessory prosecutor in the name of Holocaust survivors living in East Germany. The Israeli Minister of Justice, Pinchas Rosen, denied his request. The Karl mission was intended to take advantage of the presence of journalists from around the world in Jerusalem ahead of the opening of the Eichmann trial to attack West Germany, and especially the connection between the Chancellor Adenauer and Globke. In an international press in Tel Aviv, Karl presented the ideological view of the communist bloc, that the Eichmann trial should relate not only to Eichmann, but also to the bureaucrats who were not banished and play an essential role in Adenauer's administration. Eichmann, Karl said, had accomplices who created the precondition to his actions. And I quote, "The interpreter of the Nuremberg laws, which preceded Eichmann's action, is Globke, the right hand of Dr. Adenauer in West Germany. He and Eichmann's associates occupy high positions in his country." While the East Germans ran a major campaign to highlight Globke's activities during the Third Reich, the West Germans demanded that Israel would do whatever she could that Globke names would not be mentioned. Arms deals and loans were on the agenda, and Ben-Gurion responded favorably. The Israelis did whatever they could to avoid any embarrassment to West Germany. On one occasion, Ben-Gurion tried to convince the prosecutor, Gideon Hausner, to avoid bringing to the court a critical document that confirmed, among other things, Globke's involvement in the deportation of Jews from Germany and in the confiscation of their property. Hausner refused to Ben-Gurion's request and did present the documents. Later, however, Hausner did accept another of Ben-Gurion's demands by objecting to allowing into court specific notes about Globke that Eichmann had written in his cell. To conclude.
You don't have time.
By the end of the 50s, East Germany focused its propaganda campaign against West Germany on the so-called Nazis in Rome. Instrumentalized the atrocities of World War II and the destruction of the European Jews, East German forged historical documents with the help of their East European colleagues. The East German bloc disseminated false accusations against important figures in West Germany. At the same time, however, many of the documents and the accusations were accurate. Thus, while the Eastern Bloc propaganda aimed to harm West Germany, it also helped the democratic forces in West Germany who fought to change the Adenauer's administration's policy towards the past. Thank you.